Welcome to a public meeting this evening, meeting on discussion of the structure of the Anti-Poll Tax Federation. It was hosted by the Socialist Party, formerly militant tendency, when we were involved with, and as you'll hopefully hear tonight, led the anti-poll tax campaign. We've got a very good list of speakers tonight who are going to introduce. Hopefully it's going to be a lively discussion with lots of different points and things from the floor. I'll introduce them one by one as they come in to speak. They'll be speaking for around about half an hour, and then hopefully we'll have plenty of time for a discussion around questions if people want to ask questions of any of the speakers, and I'll allow them a little bit of time to come back at the end. And then after that we'll just have a discussion around some of the other issues that are coming up in Brighton, the Green Party's consultation over the cuts budget, and some events that are also coming up that people will probably like to be involved in. I'll introduce our first speaker. Who's Bill North, who was the secretary of the Brighton Anti-Poll Tax Federation back in the day. Obviously, a little bit before my time, but I'm privileged to share a platform with three people who are actually there on the front lines of the anti-poll tax movement. So I'll bring Bill in to speak first for about 10 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay, right. Thanks for that. Well, as you know, sort of introducing this topic, I really need to set the scene, if you like. So I'm going to be giving a bit of the basic background and the joy of sort of outlining some of the different ways of raising local government finance. So I don't feel I so much picked the short straw and I didn't thrust upon me, but it is sort of key to understanding what this type of thing is about. And I think that one of the things that I take most pride in what those of us who were involved in the campaign against the poll tax did, sort of back when we're talking over 20 years ago now, is that there's so many young people who've got no idea what the poll tax was. That's how successful the campaign was. There's loads of people who haven't even heard of it, and sort of we begin by saying a little bit about it. And it's also the case that in sort of what's going to be my first paragraph of actually starting to talk about what was happening 20 odd years ago, I'm just going to have to mention some absolutely enormous events and struggles that took place sort of in struggles of the labour and trade union that on their own we could discuss for a whole evening, a whole week of discussions, and still have plenty more to say about it. But really, I want to just sort of kind of set the scene that we're talking about the period of the late 1980s. We've got Margaret Thatcher of beloved memory, sort of as Prime Minister, and this is in the period after the end of the great miners' strike of 84, 85, where, again, as I say, something that we could spend a week discussing and still leave plenty more, and it just gets mentioned as a footnote in this particular discussion. But suffice to say that the miners, basically were defeated, not because of any, sort of lack of fighting spirit on their part, not because of a lack of justice in their claims, but basically they were defeated because of the cowardice of the leaders of the labour and trade union movement, who had it in their hands to organise support for the miners, but not only failed to do that, but to take the particular case of the leadership of the Labour Party, led at that time by a character known as Neil Kinnock, who has distinguished himself since that time by becoming a millionaire, demonstrating how capitalism rewards its own servants, even if they're not that I want to get personal. If you sense a certain degree of bitterness, that's because it really is there. But there was that thing. Following that, Thatcher sort of felt able to deal with the question of continuing her attacks on council spending, or attacks on the support that councils got from local government, and in particular that meant sort of dealing with, from her point of view, when I say her, I don't know right the person, because obviously Thatcher was the representative of her class, but taking on Liverpool City Council, and also to an extent to the Lambeth Council in London. But and again, it was the leadership of the trade union movement, and particularly the leadership of the Labour Party, that absolutely betrayed that movement of the working class. This was so I've used that last time already. This is so it's essentially what the Liverpool City Council thing was all about, and Lambeth and struggles with council generally, was an attack on local government spending by removing by cutting down on the amount of cash from central government that was paid to local authorities. And the way that many local councils attempted to deal with that problem was by increasing the rates, which were the local essentially rates were a local property tax. That to give a very quick outline of how they work, that any property was given a notional rateable value that reflected the amount of rent that it would be possible to get from it. Okay. Now, I lived in a one-bed flat at the time, and it had a rateable value, a memorable number of £123. That doesn't mean I pay £123 rates, that there was a multiplier that each year the local authority would set a rate, and it might say a rate of £1.50. So that was the multiplier times, in my case, £123. But one of the mansions along Rodine Road or Rodine Way, or whatever they're called, it might have a rateable value of 10 times what my sort of little flat was. There was no upper limit to the rateable value. And basically, because as some Labour councillors, rather than taking the Liverpool route, which I'm not going to go into any detail about, but I hope that shorthand conveys some information to most of you here. If not, perhaps it will come up in the discussion. But instead of going on that route, most Labour authorities increased the rates to compensate for the cuts that the Tory government had brought in. So that basically, rate bills were increasing and increasing and increasing. And the Tories started putting forward this story about this little widowed lady who was living in a big house, was left up, from when the family was there, and was facing a bigger and bigger rate bill. The kind of person that if this tune's around now would be accused of hoarding, hoarding accommodation, but it's quite a different view then, being used the other way. And so said, this poor little woman is being forced to pay these huge rates. They didn't mention actually that since the poorest people in society could get 100% rebate on the rates, if she really was paying rates, that means that would have meant that she had some income from a pension or investments or property or whatever. That was sort of quietly ignored. So that this fictitious little old lady paying a huge rate bill was part of the propaganda that Thatcher and her government and her press, her kept press, used against Labour councillors who'd taken that route. But then there's this saying that those who the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. I think the way of telling when a capitalist politician starts to go mad is when they act as if they believe their own propaganda. When they start believing the lies that they're telling sort of the general public in order to mislead them, then you think, for crying out loud, this is the beginning of the end. And that's the benefit of hindsight there. But Thatcher started acting as if she believed her own propaganda and her own government's propaganda about the rates and how unfair they were and this, that and the other. And came up with this idea that everyone should contribute to local government finances. And what they came up with was officially it's called the community charge, but then universally it became known as the poll tax. And it was a tax on living. It was a tax on existing. It was a sum of money that everyone everyone over the age of 18 would have to pay. The very poorest in society could get a rebate, but the maximum rebate was 20%. So even the poorest people would be expected to pay 20% of this poll tax. As we said at the time that using the kind of language of 20 odd years ago, that a duke would pay the same as a dustman. It wasn't remotely, it wasn't at all based on ability to pay, and that was put forward, as if it was a good thing. Now, the opposition certainly, those of us who organised against the poll tax, I could certainly point to 2 years before poll tax came onto the statute books in England and Wales. Because just to add nuttiness to nuttiness, the Tories brought it in a year earlier in Scotland, right? On the basis, largely, I think, that since the Tories had already been electorally destroyed in Scotland, it didn't really matter what happened there, so they'd use that as a laboratory. Well, what it did mean is that when it came to the battle against the poll tax, that in Scotland they were already a year ahead of us. So I've been asked to sum up, I'll barely set the scene, but the key to the scene to set is that from the very beginning, don't read the prize though, everyone expected this, I'm sure, that from the very beginning, the big debate in the anti-poll tax movement was to pay or not to pay. There were those, and militant tendencies, we would call them, were absolutely at the forefront of this, of calling for mass non-payment of poll tax. I'm not saying that we were the only ones who were putting that, but by far we were the most consistent, and we were the ones who stuck with that as a mass campaign of non-payment. And the rift was between that view and the view as exemplified by the Labour Party, which was wait till the general election. Okay, protest against the poll tax, complain about it, go on demos, but you've got to pay. And the general election they were talking about, I'll point out, was the 1992 general election. And for those who need to think about that, Labour got stuffed in the 92 general election, so it wouldn't have been a very good policy anyway. But basically, the point about not paying poll tax is that it was absolutely obvious that there were people who could not afford the poll tax. Labour was saying to them, pay the poll tax. I won't be able to eat. Pity, but pay the poll tax. I won't be able to buy clothes for my children. I won't be able to heat my house. I won't be able to pay my mortgage. Shame, but you've got to pay the poll tax. That was the argument of, it wasn't even New Labour in those days, but the process had begun. That was the argument. And what we came up with was a slogan which has often been misinterpreted actually, which is can't pay, won't pay. And that wasn't just a bit of repetition, that what can't pay, won't pay meant was that there would be be those who can't pay taxes, and what we were talking about was an alliance between the ones who can't pay because they literally didn't have the money, and those who won't pay in solidarity and in support of those who can't pay. And so can't pay, won't pay was talking about bringing those two together, but in a mass campaign of non-payment. Then one of the points that people in retrospect have made is, oh, we got this poll tax was doomed because people couldn't afford to pay it. There was always going to be non-payment of poll tax. That is absolutely the case. There would have been non-payment of poll tax, but it would have been done by people acting individually, very likely, perhaps shamefaced. The councils would have set bailiffs on and sent them to prison and this, that and the other. But what there was, because of the work that we did and that Julie and Kevin are going to give some details about, was that there was a non-payment campaign. There was a campaign, a mass campaign of non-payment. That at its height, there were 18 million people in Britain not paying poll tax. The biggest civil disobedience campaign that there has been so far in this country, and it was that which defeated poll tax. I've just been able to give the barest outline of the introduction. I've already spoken over the allotted time, so I'll shut